On Hilton Head, and this is a shot, of course, out toward the ocean. This is when they were approaching the coast and coming across Hilton Head. I believe this is a Four Seasons Resort, which is in that same area.
Well, the South Carolina Barrier Islands in the storm of 1893, the major hurricane then, the Barrier Islands were the scene of great death, thousands, but yet casualties now very low in comparison.
Well, and I think because of the evacuation, the communication is so much greater now, of course, than at that time. And as I've said, I think Governor Campbell and the rest of the people involved in emergency preparedness did a great job of convincing people, although we had not seen a storm like this in quite a while, that they needed to get out from the low country.
Okay, we're moving on from Hilton Head now.
Okay, we're now moving up on Fripp Island. We've come up on the other side of Pritchard's Island. We're up on Fripp Island now. It's fairly heavily revetted, and you can see that there was very little damage, if any, here on Fripp Island. Some houses under construction that we passed, but you see most of the people did board up these houses before they left.
And with this unedited footage, you can see the homes that are not damaged, and that's reassuring to people, to many people worried who've not had a chance to get down and see property that they have an attachment to or they own.
This is sort of in the heart of Fripp right here with the water tower in the back. And we'll move on up and you'll see, I believe, a golf course that fronts near the north end of the island. And we're going to see the condominiums that are really on the inlet, on Fripp Inlet. And that'll be coming in the picture here in a minute. This is sort of the middle to the north of the island. You can see the houses, even the dunes are still in place here. The surge down here was just very small. This is part of the golf course.
Very little damage to the golf course, even though it's on the
Yes, even the spillover to spray didn't seem to do much damage. This is a condominium complex on the point at Fripp Inlet. Now we're flying up the inlet. We came around the corner and flying up the inlet, and I believe one of the last things you hear will be the bridge that comes over Fripp Inlet and goes on to Fripp Island. Now we've skipped quite a ways up, as I indicated. We're now up at Edisto. We're around the backside off the Edisto River, around Big Bay Creek, and we're going down the river because there is quite a bit of development around on the river side of the inlet as it comes out into the ocean. And we're going to be turning the corner here in a few minutes, a few seconds, and going. We're still coming down the river, and we'll be turning the corner out on the ocean, and then heading up the ocean front of Edisto Island.
Again, this footage taken by Alan Sharp aboard the helicopter of Governor Carroll Campbell yesterday. That tour began yesterday morning, about 10 in the morning. They arrived back in Columbia just after 9 p.m. last night. They made several stops along the way. The purpose was to survey the damage to the coast of the state from Hurricane Hugo. And this footage, unedited, this is the entire raw footage shot by Alan.
You see most of these houses in this area of Edisto are well set back, and clearly they didn't have much to worry about because the storm really didn't impact this area of the coast. And we've seen some debris here, but I believe that is fairly minor compared to what we're going to see. I assure you it's minor.
What would account for the low level of damage below the Stono Inlet?
Well, I think it's pretty well understood now that the eye of the hurricane made landfall around Charleston, just a little north of Charleston, and the storm surge and the highest winds were, of course, north and east of the eye on the southern portion of the storm. The winds were actually moving counterclockwise and coming from onshore toward offshore. And that's what caused the surge to be fairly minor in this area. North of Charleston, north of Stono Inlet is where we're going to see the greatest preponderance of damage.
So it's very, very minor flooding damage here, and
Right. Some flooding, low-level flooding in this area.
again, as we look at this, this is all unedited footage, and we're showing you everything we have. We're airing this Saturday night at 10, repeating it Sunday night, Saturday night at 11, repeating it Sunday night at 10.
Here again in this area, a frill, very, very little damage, and we're going to get up and cross over the... This is, I'm sorry, Edisto. No, I'm sorry, Edisto now. Excuse me. Edisto, and very little damage. We're going across the old pavilion over into the state park.
It's reassuring to see all the homes in place, roofs in place here.
Right, and I think we're going to realize as we get farther up the coast, these people should be very, very thankful. This is a state park area, Edisto State Park. And this,
that's a camp there.
This is, now we're up on the Edisto River, the North Edisto. We're coming down the river, and we did see Camp St. Christopher, some of those first buildings. Now we're getting to Seabrook Island. We're coming out the North Edisto River, and we're going to make the turn here at the inlet and go down the front beach, and you're going to see the Seabrook Island Beach Club that sustained some damage to the roof. Some of the blue tin roof has been removed here by the storm, but actually minor damage compared to what we're going to see as we move farther up the coast. This is the front beach at Seabrook, a heavily eroding area that has been heavily revetted in years past. But again, we saw some shingles missing in this area, but no major damage. Again, you can see a lot of the houses were in fact boarded up before people evacuated.
So at this point, when the eye crossed in the area of Charleston, the wind was blowing from the land out to the sea. Is that correct?
Well,
roughly?
Around the eye, of course, there is a counterclockwise movement, and at some point in time, the winds would be coming. As the eye passed, the winds would shift and come from shore, from onshore to offshore. You're right. Mm-hmm. So it would hold down any surge and any flooding, but you can still see some flooding in these areas. Still boarded houses there, as you see on Seabrook.
This would hold down the surge?
Yeah, it should hold a surge. So now this is a damage up at Bohicket Marina. This is on Bohicket Creek, which is actually behind Seabrook and Kiowa. We've seen Seabrook, now we're seeing Bohicket Marina, which is actually behind that, and then I believe we're going to go back out and cover Kiowa. Now we're getting on to Kiowa. This is actually down at Beachwalker Park, which is run by Charleston County Park and Recreation Commission. Now we're getting into Kiowa, very relatively small amount of damage. You see these structures are set well back. This is a well-planned community. They're set way back from the ocean to help them weather storms as the one we've just had. But in this case, they were most fortunate that the storm really didn't impact them.
You can see the great amount of land and dune structure between the beach, between the ocean and the homes.
And you're going to see as we get farther north, we had areas that had some nice dunes, but they're no longer there because the storm actually just moved around so much sand. It's really hard to comprehend.
And it looks to be very little roof damage on the condominiums.
Right, and you can see the trees here, and you'll make a mental note and compare this area with what we're going to see as we get up farther north, where the eye of the hurricane and
this looks normal
to the north. Yes, and this is you can see the golf course here is not very disturbed, to be honest, and some flooding, of course, low-level flooding, but low lands. But I think we'll see a drastic difference in contrast when we get a little further north.
Okay, we'll move, and in just a moment we're going to move further north. Right here we have a few more seconds to look at this section. And now that's Governor Campbell aboard the helicopter. Now we're going to move further north, and let's take a look at where we are on the map. We'll see, we're going to look at Folly Beach.
Okay.
Folly Beach just south of
Folly
Charleston.
Beach is just south of Charleston, and on this map, I believe I can show you it's north of the Stono Inlet here. This is Stono Inlet. We've just concluded our tour up to Kiowa, and now we're at the Stono Inlet. And this is a line of demarcation where I believe the storm really started taking effect. And the first thing we're going to cover will be Folly Beach, Folly Island here. The south end is a state park run by Charleston County Park Recreation Commission. But then there's private development, of course, on the island. It's a very heavily revetted island. And then we'll move up across Charleston Harbor, across the jetties, into Mount Pleasant, I believe. But at first, I think we're going to watch the film of Folly Beach itself.
Let's take a look at that. Folly Beach had more structures affected by the Beachfront Management Act than any other part of the coast. And
you can see that a lot of this area is revetted. It's toward the south end. Very heavy damage, and you can see we just moved across Stono Inlet, and we come into some major damage here. Our landmark out here is the Atlantic House, and Atlantic House is no longer out there. It's lying as a heap of rubble on the beach out at Folly Beach right now. You see homes destroyed, and almost every house out here has some sort of structural damage. Debris is almost everywhere. That was the Atlantic House right there, that red roof that we just passed over. Now we're coming up on the Holiday Inn as a landmark. Holiday Inn at Folly Beach, heavily revetted structure, and I can't tell much from this what sort of damage. Looks like maybe some roof damage, but now we're going on up past that. North on the island, we're still going toward Charleston Harbor and the Charleston Harbor jetties. But you can see quite a bit of damage on the front beach, and even 2 or 3 rows back on Folly Beach.
again, this footage is unedited, and with the movement of the helicopter, Alan Sharp trying to do his best to capture specific instances. Sometimes the camera will whip and move.
Well, I think he did a great job on this, because the day that he took this, I was also flying, and the wind was, the weather was certainly unsettled the day after the hurricane, and it was some awfully choppy air to try to film anything in. You can also see evidence of flooding in the middle of the island here, back behind the first and second rows of houses. As you can see, almost every structure out here has some sort of damage to it, whether it's a roof or some internal structure has been damaged, but there's widespread damage at Folly Beach.
Helicopter, the Apache helicopter, in a hovering position, allowing a close-up look of this portion of Folly Beach. This was taken around late morning yesterday, Friday.
We're going to be approaching an area here in a few seconds, Tom, that's commonly known to as the washout, as we get up toward the north end of the island that goes up to the old Coast Guard station. You can see this. This is areas that have had some extensive erosion, and we're going to see that area in a few minutes, called what we call the washout. And the island was almost cut off up here because of the extensive erosion. See this area here, the road is actually gone that goes up to the north end of the island. extensively damaged in this area. And then the north end of the island is really cut off at the present time going out to the old Coast Guard station.
And we start seeing homes simply blown away from the foundations here in this section. Any idea of the level of storm surge at this point?
Well, I talked to Dr. Tim Conley today, who I have a great deal of respect for, and as far as knowing a lot about hurricanes and the geology of the coast of South Carolina, he feels that conservative estimates, 12 to 15, 17 feet maybe. One time we thought 20, but whatever it was, it certainly got the job done as far as damage in this state, I would think.
That would place it at about what point of these structures?
Well, a lot of these structures, of course, are fairly old out at, might point out, this is the old Coast Guard station up in the north end. Some of these structures are quite old, and they didn't really have to conform to flood insurance regulations, so they were much lower, and therefore they would not stand up. You wouldn't expect them to stand up as some of the new structures that were highly elevated above what we call storm surge. This is a Morris Island Lighthouse, of course. It's at one time, this structure, I understand, was about 300 yards.
There's Fort Sumter. We're approaching the Charleston Harbor, and that's the end of this section of the aerial tour. Footage taken yesterday on Governor Campbell's tour of the coast. We'll move next to a closer look of Mount Pleasant and the Charleston Peninsula. There's Charleston's location as we move on a helicopter tour north, and we can take a look, Dr. Beam, at exactly where we'll be going. We'll be going to Mount Pleasant, then circling around to the west.
We're coming across Charleston Harbor, and the point I was making about the lighthouse, at one time I understand it was like 300 yards on the island, back on Morris Island. Now it's out in Sur quite a ways, but we're coming across the jetties here across the harbor, and we're actually going to cross over the tip, I believe, here of Sullivan's Island and go through Mount Pleasant, and then come back onto the peninsula here in Charleston. I believe the helicopter does several circles here before it comes back out, and then we're eventually going to get back out on the Sullivan's Island.
Okay, we'll take a look at that right now. As we take a look, there we are over Mount Pleasant at this point. And we're moving in the helicopter heading west. And we'll be crossing just north of the Cooper River Bridges in just a few moments. There's Mount Pleasant.
There was extensive damage to trees in this area. I know some trees. I have some friends who informed us that there are trees lying upon their houses now. Hopefully they didn't sustain as much damage as they could have, but you can see what the wind did to certain trees in these areas, and I know certain people are in these subdivisions are still trying to cut their way out.
Of course, this aerial view can just show us an overview. There's nothing of the level of damage and the trauma and disruption of life that's taking place in the Charleston area at this moment.
Well, I might point out also, Tom, these people don't have electricity. I think the sewer situation down there is bad, and the water situation, there's no water, so you really can't understand what a problem we have, and it will begin to mount in the Charleston area, even in Mount Pleasant out here. Utilities just aren't there, and it's really going to be hard to say when they're going to get them back because of the extensiveness of the damage.
All the trees felled in one direction, generally. Did most of that occur as the storm approached and the eye approached the coast?
Well, I would think so. Anytime at the wall of the eye, you're having winds up to 135 miles an hour, and in certain cases, I still believe that it spawns some tornadoes because of the way it moves certain houses on up the beach. At the wall of the eye, there certainly must be some tornadoes spun off from that even precede the storm and cause problems. But that tremendous wind near the center of the storm, plus the storm surge. But here, I think there's a lot of wind damage that preceded, especially where the trees are knocked down.
Okay, here's the twin spans of the Cooper River Bridge. And did these sustain damage?
Not that I could tell when I flew over them yesterday, and this tape really doesn't show evidence. I don't see any evidence and haven't heard reports of evidence to the Cook River bridges.
What protected Charleston?
Well, Charleston is the peninsula is set back in the harbor, and it has Barrier Islands, which took the brunt of it. And we're going to see that as we go back out to Sullivan's and Isle of Palms. But this is downtown Charleston on the peninsula.
If you are taping this and you stop it and spot check it, you can spot some landmarks as we go through. And we'll take a swing around the battery, then we'll come back up again and look at Charleston through a different angle here. But you can see, if you see the white steeple as we're approaching it, look just to the left of the white steeple. There are two square roofs. One is the courthouse, and the smaller one is the city hall. And City Hall and the courthouse sustained heavy roof damage.
And this is, now we're moving south of Broad down toward the Battery.
Some roof problems and trees.
Right, now we're out looking at the Battery, and we're going to be turning the corner here, I believe, and heading up the Cook River.
There's a satellite truck, one of the news gathering trucks. Charleston is attracting enormous media attention, of course, with the storm's passage and its aftermath. In just a moment, maybe you'll see a cluster of satellite trucks that are parked just to the left of the Ports Authority building.
You know, we come across the Shrine Club there, the Shrine building. It's a landmark that people can notice, identify.
And as you look, we'll be passing over the market area.
And of course, Tom, as a church, it's I believe it's weathered several of these. St. Philip's has weathered several of these storms.
Okay, there's the market. You see the roof,
part of the roof gone,
blown away.
And we're sort of moving to the right here, is moving up Meeting Street.
Mm-hmm. Methodist Church.
All right. The old Washington Light Infantry building there, and part of the College of Charleston. And we move across Calhoun here, and this is the Federal building in our bottom of the frame there right now. We're moving on up Meeting Street, going up toward where the Interstate Highway I-26 and the crosstown merge.
It gives you an idea of the enormous task and successful task of evacuating that metropolitan area before the storm.
Well, and I think it also points out the problem that of finding the services, the utilities, getting them back in place. The infrastructure for the electrical utilities is almost going to have to be rebuilt, and it's going to take some time, unfortunately.
There's the Interstate I-26, and
we're turning across the peninsula, I believe, going over toward the Ashley River.
in case you've just joined us, I'm Tom Fowler. I'm with Dr. Wayne Beam, Executive Director of the South Carolina Coastal Council, and we're watching unedited footage from a helicopter tour by Governor Carroll Campbell yesterday, Friday, from Hilton Head to North Myrtle Beach, survey of the damage caused by Hurricane Hugo. And you're seeing all the footage that was shot by Alan Sharp, videographer with South Carolina ETV.
Okay, we're moving now back across, coming down the Ashley River. You can see the Medical University sort of in the background, and these are marinas, the city marina. And we're moving back down the Ashley River out toward the harbor. and they're a good shot at peninsula. This is a shot of the Coast Guard station there in the Ashley River.
That home is under construction there. I don't believe that's damaged.
Right, that's not damaged, as I understand. That was under construction.
You can see some evidence of the flooding in the street there. How much water did downtown Charleston have in the streets? Are there reports of that?
I understood it was extensive. I don't know exact figure of how many feet of water, but I know the water certainly overtopped the battery with several feet of water. I just don't know yet. But amazingly, some people rode the storm out down in this area.
How many?
I don't know how many. But, every one of them must be a brave soul, I would say that, to have stayed here. We had a couple of our staff people who stayed in North Charleston, and we had contact with them up to about 11 o'clock that night, and the next day they told me that would be the last one they would weather, even in North Charleston. They were up on Montague Avenue, and they don't care to go through another one.
We're coming up King Street now, heading north.
Yes, May, I think we do see some damage up in these areas, some roofs and some industries may have been damaged, but I think I'd be remiss if I didn't reiterate that if we ever have another thing like this, if there's a warning, I think people should evacuate. I don't believe people should take a chance and stay in the eye of a storm of this magnitude. You can see some damage this far up the peninsula. It's an industry that has tremendous structural damage. This is some of the wind damage. I think you can see, Tom, to compare this to some of the areas that we saw earlier down south of the Stone Inlet. The wind damage just snapped trees off as though they were toothpicks.
That's the Mark Clark Expressway construction.
And you can see the damage here. The trees just uprooted almost. It's really hard to get a sense of damage, I think, even water damage to these structures when you're looking straight down upon them. But I think if you had a more of a oblique angle and get on the ground, you can see there may be some flooding damage or wind damage to these structures, even this far back from the shoreline itself. And clearly these areas, again, are without basic utilities. Tremendous hardship on the people in Charleston and the other parts of the low country at this time.
The amount of damage to timber is something that's not been talked about as we look at we've been concentrating on damage to property and enormous amount of timber loss from the storm. Pass over the interstate one more time. And next we'll move on to the map. We'll be looking at Sullivan's Island, then we'll move just north to the Isle of Palms after Sullivan's Island. And then we'll be going to Wild Dunes, which is on the northern tip of the Isle of Palms.
Yes, I might point some of those out on this map, Tom. We're leaving Charleston now, coming back off the peninsula, and we're coming out here back through the harbor, and we're going to take a turn here on Sullivan's Island, and you're going to see, I think, some graphic damage here, some graphic examples of damage. We're going to cross Breach Inlet and go up on the Isle of Palms. And, of course, Wild Dunes is a very popular resort area on the northern tip here. And I believe we swing around and see parts of the golf course that border on Dewee's Inlet. This is Dewee's Island right across here. Is a private island. But I think that's the next footage we're going to see, basically those two islands.
Okay, let's take a look at the footage now. As we continue our helicopter tour, you're seeing what Governor Carroll Campbell and a party of top state officials saw yesterday morning, early afternoon. There's Sullivan's Island.
And we're zeroing in, I believe, now on the Ben Sawyer Bridge, which connects Mount Pleasant with Sullivan's Island. You can see that it's been damaged extensively, and it's going to take some work to get it back in shape to carry traffic. So basically, both Sullivan's Island and Isle of Palms actually cut off to vehicular traffic at this time, and as I understand it, as of right now, they're asking nobody to return, even property owners, to return to both Sullivan's Island and Isle of Palms.
Fortunately, this area had almost 100% evacuation before the storm hit.
Right, we're swinging back around now and looking at a development here that we're going to see in just a second on the south side of the Ben Sawyer Bridge called Toller's Cove. There were a number of boats out there, and you can see some structural damage. And you can see this damage occurred even though it's actually behind Barry Island. Sullivan's Island's in front of it, and we're now coming up on Sullivan's Island. You can see the difference here from the area we described much earlier down south of the Stonewall River. You can see the damage that this storm has caused on Sullivan's Island, and I believe in a minute here we'll see a landmark. I believe we'll see the old lighthouse.
And again, you're seeing unedited footage. This is all the footage shot in the helicopter tour. So you're seeing the camera moves, starts and stops.
Right, we're passing Fort Moultrie and coming around the harbor side and coming out to the ocean front. And in the background, in a few minutes, I believe you're going to see the old Sullivan's Island lighthouse. It's in the top of the frame now, and the distinguishing factor. This is Sand Dunes Club out there. They suffered some damage. And the lighthouse, of course. But again, extensive damage to structures near the front of the island and flooding toward the interior of the island.
What's the estimate of the storm surge at this point on Sullivan's Island?
Again, I think a conservative estimate would be around 15 feet would have been the surge. Most of the people I consider to be knowledgeable about that topic seem to think a conservative estimate is around 15 feet, and it certainly could have been more than that. Again, see their houses actually no longer in existence. They've been blown off their foundation. And extensive flooding in the interior of the island, back off the beach.
You can see a new creek being cut.
Well, it's almost like a new inlet being cut into the island there because of the force of the storm. I believe that's the old bunker on Sullivan's Island you can see in the background. Of course, extensive damage even to structures that are back off the beach here. I think it's an interesting point to be made about that structure that's standing out there. We haven't done nearly enough work in this state on building codes and trying to adopt some building codes that would be wind resistant. And of course, some of these new structures you see are elevated to meet federal flood insurance standards. But it's really hard to explain why some houses on the front would survive the storm and some behind them wouldn't. And it probably has to do with the aerodynamics of the design of the structure itself. And these are some new structures on the beach that are elevated. coming up toward the middle part of the island, and before we get into the Wild Dune section, which is at the north end.
We're still on Sullivan's, or have we moved to Isle of Palms?
I believe this is still Sullivan's. That's right, I'm sorry. We're on Sullivan's, and we haven't come up to Breach Inlet yet. We're on Sullivan's, and we'll be seeing crossing Breach Inlet here in just a minute. And you're right, Wild Dunes is certainly at the north tip of the Isle of Palms. We haven't gotten there yet.
There's a house under construction. Used to be. Is that right?
Well, it certainly is now, I would say.
Up here.
You see even damage several rows back here. It's what gives you an idea of the force of this of the storm as it entered here on Sullivan's Island. And this must have been fairly close to the eye of the storm.
Such unevenness of a home several rows back.
Right.
Demolished, but yet something in front of it. Okay.
Right.
Well, the Windjammer Club there.
Right. Of course, now this
Now
is
we're on the
Isle of Palms. Yeah. They threw me a curve there for a minute. We're all on the Isle of Palms, and this is the old business section down there, Windjammer, with some damage. And now we're on a condominium complex out here that at one time had a fishing pier. It's no longer there. It's been removed, and you can see some extensive damage here. And again, we have now crossed over Breach Inlet from Sullivan's Island. We are on the Isle of Palms, and I think the thing that is really quite interesting out here is the amount of litter that you see and debris that's actually on the front beach. And I think Alan shot some of that while he was putting this film together. There's the debris. You can see it's quite extensive.
Okay, just a point here that when we crossed the Breach Inlet, we didn't have a very clear shot of that. So
Right.
when we had a sign saying Sullivan's Island, the very last of that, there may have been some Isle of Palms
Right, clearly we
shot there. So we might have had a little overlap.
We did not have a good shot of Breach Inlet, so it threw us off a little bit as to when we crossed there and we got onto Isle of Palms. And some of those new structures, as a matter of fact, sitting out front were on the Isle of Palms, on the south of the Isle of
I
Palms.
think it is remarkable, though, in just this one pass to get all the material we have. And it was shot in news style, and again, in news style shooting, you'd edit a lot. What we're doing is showing you everything we have. Hopefully this has the visual information you want.
And I think people may find it a little more difficult to find structures because we're seeing such a small segment of the coast at one time. It's sometimes very difficult to identify structures that they might in fact be interested in, since we're not seeing a very broad panoramic view of these islands.
Still moving up Isle of Palms, and not quite at Wild Dunes yet. Getting close.
We're getting close, and in this area, for all the Citadel people, there was some extensive damage to the Citadel Beach Club in this area. I understand the outbuildings were pretty well demolished, and there was although the structure is still standing, there's some extensive damage to the Citadel Beach Club out here on the Isle of Palms.
There's a house pushed completely off its foundations into another house in the back. This island, two people walking on the street, but almost totally deserted. And now sealed off, no entry permitted by anyone unless authorized officials. Damage intensifying as move north.
Well, it almost has a numbing effect on you after you see so much of this, Tom, as you and I have looked at for the last several days now. It's really just hard to comprehend, and now we're up in the Wild Dunes section. Some very expensive houses, and some of them were damaged. There's one that's off the foundation.
That would appear to have good, solid supports.
Concrete,
supports.
right. And this is a condominium complex with some damage to the roof. It's part of the internal portion of the building exposed at this time. And flooding you can see in the rear.
This is Wild Dunes. We're still on the Isle of Palms. Wild Dunes is on the northern tip of the Isle of Palms. So we're in the Wild Dunes section.
Yeah, we're going to be approaching the Wild Dunes golf course here, and it's really quite devastating what the storm did to, especially hole 17 and hole 18. 18 took a lot of damage, but I think 17, which faced on Dewee's Inlet, had even more damage. And these are condominium complexes up in Wild Dunes as we'll be approaching Dewee's Inlet here soon. And you can see the top of the frame, and in the background Dewee's Island.
This footage, this helicopter tour, gives us just an incredible feeling of the immensity of the problem of cleanup and rebuilding. Just how many people, how much property, just massive.
Well, I think that's true, and I would think all those people who don't live in this part of the state at this point in time should certainly be sympathetic with the tremendous rebuilding effort that faces the residents and the state officials, federal officials, local officials, and I would hopefully we're going to pull together, and this is going to be a united effort.
That's part of the golf course there.
Part of the golf course. The 17th hole is where it was at one time. The 17th hole. There's not much left there now. I think we're going to see some of the tree damage now on I believe this might be out at Dewee's or Bull Island. This is the north end. The back end, I believe, of the Isle of Palms. And you saw some of the damage to the trees that the high wind velocity caused. And this is, you mentioned the timber industry up in the, certainly a tremendous amount of suffering is going to be had in the timber industry in this state, I think, in this area.
Okay, now we're again showing you everything we shot, and when they go around the island again, as they're doing in this case, you're seeing it just as the helicopter did yesterday. So they're taking you around one more time. And we're back on Sullivan's Island.
I believe I beg to differ. We've gotten across Breach Inlet again. This is, I think, we're
Isle of
back
Palms now.
on the Isle of Palms now. Right, and this is a business district now, the old Windjammer, in the middle of Isle of Palms, and a panoramic view of the north of the island toward Wild Dunes.
That's panoramic. Alan shot the first pass very tight, and it's very hard to hold that camera in a moving helicopter very tight, very smooth, for very long. And so on the second pass, it's pulling back wide, seeing a little bit wider shot. Gives us a good idea of the flooding. Moving a little more on the interior of the isle.
I think we're going to be coming up on this pass, if I'm not mistaken, Tom, on the marina on the back of Isle of Palms, and I think people will begin to realize the strength that this storm had when it came across in this area, when we see what it did to the boats in the marina, the Wild Dunes Marina at the back of the Isle of Palms there on the Intracoastal Waterway. We're going to see that in a minute here.
People who have visited that may remember it as a magnificent marina, stopped to so many boats in the traffic pattern going north and south on the Intracoastal Waterway.
You can see what it's done. The boats now are all the way across the Intracoastal Waterway. They're piled up on the other side of the Intracoastal Waterway like toys, and I talked to some people today who knew what was contained in this marina. They think it might be $50 million worth of damage in this one area, just to this marina and to the boats that you can see there now lie like toys on the eastern side of, the western side of the Intracoastal Waterway, right behind the Isle of Palms. I think that is clear testimony to the strength that this storm packed when it hit the South Carolina coast.
So you can see there's the ocean, and the surge went over the top of the land. There was enough force of the water and the wind.
I think wind and storm surge in this area resulted in these boats. I've never seen anything quite like that, to be quite honest. There must be 35 to 50 boats in this heap. And we looked and we said they must not have had them tied down too well, but it took the moorage and everything and laid it over on the other side of the Intracoastal Waterway. Now we're coming back across the Intracoastal Waterway, passing across the Isle of Palms back into the Wild Dunes area.
And we're in Wild Dunes, part of the northern tip of the Isle of Palms. Some of the newer homes there.
And part of the golf course.
Passing through the middle of the Wild Dunes development. It's difficult sometimes to know where there was actually a lake there and where there's flooding.
Well, there is a lagoon system, of course, to help manage stormwater runoff in this area, but it's very hard to pick them out at this point in time because of the flooding that's occurred in the interior parts of the island.
And passing over the condominium development at the end.
Dewee's Inlet here and Dewee's Island in the background.
Okay, let's recap just briefly where we are. Now we're north of Charleston. If we can, if we can go to your map first here and just show us again where we are with the
Okay,
Wild Dunes.
we've actually stopped here at our north end of the Isle of Palms. The next island is Dewee's Island. Just north of that is an island owned by the state of South Carolina, Capers Island, run by the Wildlife Department.
Okay, move us around where we were. We went around.
We came off the peninsula, came across Sullivan's Island, and then we went up by the Isle of Palms, and we came back around. The marina that we saw was up in this area, and we came back around, and then the last shot you saw was across Dewee's Inlet, and saw Dewee's Island here, and then the progression goes Dewee's, Capers, and then Bull Island, and then this is the heart of the Cape Romaine National Wildlife Refuge, and this is what we call Bull Bay. McClellanville is located a little higher up here.
Okay, let's take a look at the large map first. There we are. That's where we are now, moving up the coast.
Yeah.
Now, show us on your map, Dr. Beam, a little better about where we're going to go. We're going to McClellanville.
Okay, we're leaving the north end of the Isle of Palms, and I think there's going to be a fairly hurried flyover here past these islands, and we're actually going to get into Bulls Bay and this is part of the Cape Romaine National Wildlife Refuge, and McClellanville is back up in here past Lighthouse Island and Cape Island, out here, protected, we thought, by a lot of these barrier islands, but you're going to see some extensive damage up around McClellanville. But tremendous wind damage that we found back here in the national forest, the Francis Marion National Forest, back behind Bull Bay. Must have been a tremendous amount of wind there.
Okay, as we take a look at the tape, there we are.
And this is some of those barrier. I think Bull Island out here, you can see a tremendous amount of wind damage on trees. Palmetto trees are barely distinguishable, actually. There's so much damage to them and to the pine trees that have been out here on this island.
And in this whole area, north of the Wild Dunes and south of McClellanville, sparsely populated.
Right, this island is run by the Fish and Wildlife Service, the Department of Interior, the Wildlife Refuge. Now I believe we've seen some areas on the other side of the waterway, and just seeing some of the damage. And this is an area I think that's most clearly evident where wind damage was so terrific in this area. You can see what it's done to trees. Snapped them off like toothpicks in this area. And as I said earlier, there must be some extensive damage in the national forest, which is fronts the Intracoastal Waterway here behind Cape Romaine National Wildlife Refuge.
We entering the McClellanville area yet?
We're getting close into that area. I think you're going to see it. I saw numerous foundations of houses in some of these areas back here and I believe this is one we're coming up on now in the shot. It shows where a house was located one time, and this is even back behind the marsh, behind the Cape Romaine National Wildlife Refuge. Now we're moving into McClellanville, and you can see what it did to some of the boats here at McClellanville. This is the Intracoastal Waterway at McClellanville, and we're actually going up, we're going to find, this is Jeremy Creek. You can see the extensive damage to some of the seafood processing areas here in McClellanville. And Tom, I think you might mention some of the flooding that is quite evident here in this area.
We'll see in just a moment a school that was an evacuation area where the people of McClellanville gathered, many people gathered, set far back from the ocean, from the water, assumed safe. In just a moment you'll see it. It was completely surrounded by water. And Alan Sharp talked to one of the people there at the school. The governor's helicopter landed at the school yesterday, and when he saw the people waving there, surrounded by water, just to reassure them of the support of the state and trying to find out what could be done to help them. In just a moment you'll see that, and that they had waves against the side of the school, according to one person who was there at the school. You can see the boats up. We're going to go back across before we see the school. Some of the fishing fleet there at McClellanville. See what it's done to some boats. Some of them are. This is an area that some of them might put them in dry dock, but you can see what some of the storm damage has done. If it pushed the boat that high, the surge was at about what point here? Any idea? Well, it's really hard to say, but yeah. But it really amazes some of us that we did get this kind of water this far back up into Bulls Bay, and I think that that indicates that the eye of the storms certainly was south of here, and that wall of water was pushed north and east of the eye when it made landfall around Charleston. So as you'll see when we approach this school, there were some very fortunate people with a wall of water that was so close to this school, pushing those fishing boats up on the land like that. There's the school evacuation area. And you'll see when we move around with the helicopter, the power of the water when it rearranges the cars parked in the parking lot into one jumbled mass of metal. That was an evacuation area, and you can see the water that's remaining after the storm. There were waves against the side of this during the storm. There you see the cars. You can see the power of that water pushing and rearranging thousands of pounds, tons of metal. Okay, at this point, we'll move in just a moment. McClellanville set back from the ocean. Tom, I think this shows a good example of this storm didn't just pick out people in the Barry Islands. There are people who are certainly suffering from the consequences of this storm who are not people who have just second homes on Barry Islands, but they're people of moderate income who are certainly suffering because of the hurricane that hit this state. They came back over the school. The helicopter yesterday landed at the school, and they met with people from the McClellanville community. many people poor, low income in this area, not heavily populated, rural and dependent on the sea for their livelihood in many cases.
And I think we ought to point out that the storm wreaked havoc, not just here on the coast, but on towards Sumter, on up towards Charlotte, and the whole path there are people who are suffering from the consequences of the storm, not just the people who live on Barry Islands.
Absolutely. What we're doing is simply showing you the helicopter tour of the coast, and this storm and its destruction and its impact on lives reaches far beyond the coast into the interior of South Carolina and on beyond. In a very relatively remote rural area near McClellanville. Okay, let's go to our next map to give us an idea. We're going to have, this will be the final part of our helicopter tour of the coast. We'll go from Pawleys Island, we'll go north to Litchfield and Garden City, then Surfside Beach, then Myrtle Beach, and on to North Myrtle Beach. Let's take a look at your map.
Okay, Tom, what we've actually done is we're going to move now. We're making a big jump here from McClellanville in this area, going across, we're jumping all the way across the North and South Santee Rivers, across Winyaw Bay, and we're actually going to end up on what we call the Waccamaw Neck, which is just north of Georgetown. And the first footage, I believe, is going to be Deberdew Colony, which is here, and this map is of such gross scale, you're not going to see little islands out here, but Deberdew, and then we're going to Pawleys Island, and into Litchfield, and then from that we're going to cross over and to Murrells Inlet, and Huntington Beach State Park, of course, is right there. We cross the Murrells Inlet jetties, and we go to Garden City, and of course the tip down there is where the jetties are. We move up Garden City, and then from there we bleed into Surfside Beach, and then from Surfside Beach into what I call South Myrtle, and then Myrtle Beach, and then Briarcliff Acres, and then on up into North Myrtle Beach.
Okay, let's take a look at that, and we'll start off just north of Georgetown.
This is Deberdew, and a lot of this was behind the seawall, and you better to understand that just tremendous surge here damaged these houses. Some of these houses, I think, cost the construction alone between $500,000 to $1 million. And you can see what the surge did here. It destroyed some of these houses. You can see pretty extensive flooding in the interior of Deberdew here. You see the tremendous scarps where they cut away dunes. These were giant dunes in front, and they've been scarped extensively by the storm.
Scarped, what is that?
Well, they've been eroded away, and we call it the scarp, where the face of that dune now is exposed. Now we're crossing, this is one of the most amazing areas, I think. We're crossing Midway Inlet, and this is the south end of Pawleys Island. I think this is one of the greatest landmarks in the state of South Carolina. And you can see that the storm actually cut a new inlet here. You're going to see that in just a second, and they capped it off by putting a house in the middle of it.
There's the inlet.
There are houses here that were here that are now back in the creek, and some of them have actually been blown back to the mainland behind Pawleys Island. We're coming up toward the middle of the island, and in this area south of the South Causeway, there's still extensive damage. You can see houses that have been propelled back into second and third row. The houses in the middle of the island seem to have fared better than those certainly down on the south end. Still looking at damage at Pawleys. There were some nice dunes in this area. They've certainly been cut away by the storm surge, and there's damage pretty much throughout Pawleys. This is another one of the causeways that come onto the island.
How long will it take to rebuild a dune system?
Well, a lot of this sand we feel is just offshore, and I could see even yesterday some of that sand is coming back on shore, but you know, it's not, we're moving into a time of year where we're usually into erosional pattern rather than an accretional pattern. Accretion starts during the spring and summer. So we're entering this period in certainly a tremendous net deficit.
Is there danger for further damage from the tides in the winter?
And I would like to say that we are considering an emergency order that we hope to be issuing in the next day or so. That's going to allow people to push sand or bring sand in from, as long as it's compatible sand from external sources, or push sand from the mean low water up toward their houses to get some protection. And of course, we already at this time have an emergency order in place that would allow people to use sandbags to help protect structures. But the beach face has been lowered dramatically by this storm. This is the Pawleys Island Pier Village, and you can see there's no longer a pier here. It's been destroyed. We're moving toward the north end of Pawleys now, and still damage here in this area.
If you've just joined us, we're looking at unedited footage taken yesterday aboard Apache helicopter of the South Carolina National Guard with Governor Carroll Campbell, other top state officials, Alan Sharp from ETV, shooting the pictures. And you're seeing them as they were shot, going from Hilton Head to North Myrtle Beach.
Now we crossed the inlet. We're up here now on a beach called Magnolia Beach, which is the southern part of Litchfield, and now we're into some of the development at Litchfield. You can see still some damage in these areas, but a landmark on this part of the beach, I think, would be the old Litchfield Inn, and it suffered a good bit of damage, and we'll be coming up on that here in just a little bit. This is the Litchfield Inn here, and you can see there's some damage to some of the cabanas on each side here. There's one there that has some damage. And I believe this area is more properly called, or termed Litchfield by the Sea in this area, part of the Litchfield development. And again, they had some very nice dunes in this area, and they've certainly been...
you can see the white sand being
been dramatically reduced as a clubhouse, and it's been undermined, it seems, by... And this was a big dune at this point, and it's certainly been cut away. I think this area is probably better termed North Litchfield we're getting into now here.
Dunes still in place there, pretty much.
Right, not as extensive a damage as we've seen in some of the other areas.
And this program will air twice on ETV, Saturday night at 11, Sunday night at 10 p.m.
Okay, we're crossing Burroughs Inlet now, and this is the south end of Garden City. You see there's some very nice homes out here, and one thing that helped save these houses, I believe, is that there was sand pumped up on the north side of the north jetty there, and there's a good bit of sand, a tremendous volume of sand that is built out in front here and accreted, and it certainly didn't hurt to have that amount of sand out in front of some of these houses. But as we go a little farther north here, I think we're going to see some of what I consider to be some of the worst damage we had. In one area, I think there's like out of 15 homes on the front beach, 12 of them we couldn't account for, they're gone. And some of them were unfortunately propelled into houses behind them.
With all the damage, though, this the point of Garden City, this is remarkable. the amount of damage here compared to the damage south and damage north of it.
Right.
It did quite well, and this snow road there is covered with sand. Coming around the point, Garden City. This area constructed over the last 20 years. 20 years ago, just a enormous, magnificent set of sand dunes at the end of Garden City. It's in the last 15, 20 years, large, very beautiful homes built on the point, Garden City. You can see the patterns of sand as pushed by the surge past the foundations of the homes.
Well, and you can clearly see how much sand was moved since the road was actually covered by sand that came off the beach, and there was a lot of sand on this beach.
And now we'll start moving north.
Yeah, we're actually moving north, and we're going up past Marlin Cay Marina and up toward the Kingfisher Inn as a landmarks that some people will recognize. This is, of course, down toward the point, and now we're beginning to move north.
How much can people rebuild?
Well, it's actually going to depend on where they are in relation to the baseline and the setback lines on the beach statute. But, you know, most houses, I think, single-family dwellings are going to be in pretty good shape. But I think clearly we're beginning to assess that situation right now, given the lines on the maps and exactly which structures have been damaged. But here we're getting in some of the greatest destruction, I think, compares to areas south here at Pawleys. There are some houses actually missing here, and you can see some of them have been propelled back across the street into houses. There's one right there has been propelled back into the street, across the street actually, and it's been propelled into a house behind it. I think we counted in this area something like 12 out of 15 of them were just totally destroyed. And it might, you know, prompt one to speculate that clearly this might be an area where a tornado might have been spawned to do this kind of damage. That certainly hadn't been confirmed, but to see that kind of localized damage would lend that kind of thought that maybe a tornado was spawned at the wall of the eye to do this kind of damage. There again, you see the kind of destruction here. And now we're getting up. This is the Kingfisher, and there used to be a pier in front of that, and it's no longer there.
Okay, we'll swing around Garden City now, and the helicopter will move back to be able to see a different perspective as we move over the inlet, the creek there. There's one home in the middle of the road. See it there on the lower part of the screen. And this was a heavily built-up area, and you can see gaping holes, empty land. You
can see the Kingfisher Inn out there, and this I think at one time was called Sam's Corner, right behind Kingfisher, and of course the pier was there. It's been there for some time. It's no longer there. It's obliterated by the storm.
Come back over. There's the remains of the restaurant pier.
That's the foundation of the beginnings of the pier, and it's
nothing there.
The building's gone.
Okay, we're going to move on up. Now we're moving into approaching Surfside. This is the area between Garden City and Surfside.
I might point out for people that Garden City is really not a municipality. It's the county line runs in here in this area, and to the south of it is Georgetown County, to the north of it is Horry County. And we're getting up north now. We'll pass out of Garden City, and this is still some Garden City, some extensive development they've had there. We'll move up into Surfside Beach here in a few minutes. This Garden City area was hit pretty hard by the storms of December '86, January '87. And it looks like we're going to be dealing with some of the same issues down there after this storm, and that is some of the swimming pool rebuilding that is clearly now out on the beach, and the other amenity packages like jacuzzis that are now just lying out on the beach, and we're going to see more of those as we go farther north.
Now we're into the Surfside area, I think, now.
Yeah, we're moving into Surfside Beach. You can see there was pretty extensive flooding, it appears, as we move inland off the beach. This is a day's end there at Surfside Beach. And their pier, of course, is no longer there. Really gets a little monotonous after a while, but the damage is so extensive.
Right.
You can't just say it's here and there. It's almost everywhere. There's damage, structural damage throughout the northern part of the coast.
Well, people who have property in certain parts of this, we just don't know where your interest lies, and we're showing everything, every bit of the footage we have, and hopefully the visual information is there that you want to see. We hope so.
Moving in some of the campgrounds now in what I call South Myrtle Beach, northern part of Surfside, up in the southern part of Myrtle Beach, and you can see clearly the wash over here. So the tremendous amount of water that must have come across this area to wash the beach back into those areas, as you can see here.
As we move a little bit north, you'll see some trailers there, some
modular type homes that have been extensively damaged.
Alan Sharp will move his camera around a little bit, and you'll see that.
I believe this is part of Myrtle Beach State Park in this area. Again, really some damage to the front dunes out there, but since it is such a low intensity development, it wasn't too bad. And we're actually going to be getting up pretty soon here into Springmaid Beach.
There's another helicopter passing by. Below.
This is all part of the southern part of Myrtle Beach we're in now. We're moving up to Myrtle Beach proper.
On the south end of the beach.
And some of this area in here was renourished by the city of Myrtle Beach to the tune of about $4.5 million 3, 4, 5 years ago. And I would say I'd have to speculate that amount of sand they put on the beach was probably well worth it in this storm. I think the damage would have even been worse had it not been for the volume of sand that was present in front of some of these structures.
Did Hurricane Hugo take the sand away?
It took a great deal away, but a lot of it is, we feel, in a near surf zone, and a lot of it is starting to move back. The surf was heavily laden with sediment yesterday, and it was moving back on as we were flying it, which is heartening, to say the least. Hopefully, a lot of this sand is going to move back on.
Would that build a flatter beach? What would that do?
Well, it's going to be a natural process to build a beach, but it's going to take some time. And clearly, we think that the answer up here, because of the extensive development, is to move forward as rapidly as we can with the renourishment project in the Grand Strand.
Passing by the Swamp Fox roller coaster.
Yeah, we're going to be coming up on a pavilion here in an amusement park run by Myrtle Beach Farms Company, which is right in the middle of Myrtle Beach, in a clearly a landmark that many South Carolinians and others from all over the country who visited Myrtle Beach will recognize here in a few minutes as we get up to it.
We can't see the Ocean Boulevard here, but it's covered with sand now.
And here's the amusement park, as I alluded to earlier, in the pavilion is going to be coming into view here. See it now in the center of the frame.
Of course, people are back into Myrtle Beach now.
There were people waiting, as a matter of fact, on Highway 9 as we flew over yesterday morning, waiting to get back into North Myrtle Beach as we got in there around 10:30, 11 o'clock.
We'll move on up Myrtle Beach, north of the pavilion. We don't seem to see. We're a little farther away from we're a little higher in the air, a little more offshore, but not the massive destruction of further south.
No, but I think as we get farther up, actually in the North Myrtle Beach, there are more and more pools and erosion control devices that are damaged, and if we were a little closer, I think we could see some of that.
Mm-hmm. At some point, we're going to be moving from Myrtle Beach to North Myrtle Beach. I think we're still in Myrtle Beach.
Yeah, that was an area, I believe, that was down in the area that I would call down near the old Ocean Forest Hotel, and now we're moving on up the beach here.
Condominium units.
You know, this is the area of residential houses here, and this is more near that area I was talking about, the area which
Are we in North Myrtle Beach?
No, this is still Myrtle Beach. I believe that area was down near where the old Ocean Forest was at one time, and that looked like the Sheraton. That's up around 72nd Avenue North, showing some of the beach erosion in this area. And clearly some research actually went into some of these hotels on the ground floors.
Now we're in North Myrtle Beach now.
I think we moved into North Myrtle Beach here. Again, in this area we had a good many pools damaged, it appeared, and extensive damage to some erosion control devices. And that's one of the piers. It's gone. It's no longer there.
Another section of a pier.
You see the remains of a pier, and I don't recall seeing a single pier that was still standing yesterday in the northern.
Will the piers be able to rebuild?
Well, we certainly hope so, because they're used extensively, but it's a matter of economics, and all I can say right now is I certainly hope they'll be rebuilt. It's certainly a part of the heritage of the state, I would think.
As we near the end of this footage, a reminder, this was footage taken yesterday aboard the helicopter with Governor Carroll Campbell and top state officials on the survey of the damage of Hurricane Hugo from Hilton Head to North Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, taken by Alan Sharp of ETV. Footage made available to television stations throughout South Carolina, throughout the nation. As you see, you can see the light getting low there. They started the tour about 10 in the morning, ended up at sunset. lying the length of the coast.
You can see it damages this far up the coast, and we're some distance now away from where the eye of the hurricane made landfall in Charleston. You can see we're at North Myrtle Beach, and there's still structural damage. There was a pier right there, Tom, also, if that development is gone.
A lot of debris there. And this is it. This is all our footage, unedited. You've seen it. You've seen it all. It's just almost leaves you without any words to describe that.
Well, I think the task ahead of us is formidable. I wouldn't use any other word other than that. That would be putting it mildly. And I think that it's time for the people of the state to pull together with all the assistance that we can gather from every source and start putting lives back together and start putting the coast back together.
As far as the Coastal Council, what are you doing now?
Well, we're trying to get regroup as everybody else is down there. We have an office running in Charleston with no utilities. We're trying to operate out of Columbia, and we're certainly going to be moving some people probably who are located in Beaufort in our offices to try to move to the northern parts of the coast to try to assist people in complying with statutes that we have to implement. And we will ask people to be indulgent with us because we have to put some things back together also, but we will try to meet every demand that's placed upon us, I'll assure you.
Has any other part of this country experienced what we've experienced? We are, some rankings have our tourism industry as #1 in this state. We're looking so heavily to that industry as the growth industry for the latter part of this century. Where are we now?
Well, I'm very concerned about that. I hope people across this country and throughout the world will realize that South Carolina we're going to make a tremendous comeback from this, and we're going to have a tremendous tourism industry in this state. I think there's no doubt about it. I think the people of the state and the governmental officials are committed to that, and I think I speak for the people of this state that we'll come out from under this and we'll have a tremendous tourism industry that we can be proud of.
Did anyone on your staff ever have any sense of the kind of impact of this? You have the specialists. You're the people that deal with it throughout your careers.
Well, we knew it was going to be bad. We started tracking this thing early on once it passed Puerto Rico and did some damage there. We were getting updates every 3 hours from the Coral Gables Hurricane Center, National Weather Service. We knew it was going to be bad, and we realized how bad it was going to be, and working with John Purvis and the Weather Service and everybody we could deal with, realizing that the angle of incidence was going to be almost a 90-degree angle. And we had never had one quite like that we were aware of that would build this kind of storm surge and this kind of wind velocity. And it appeared that it tracked along at 105 miles an hour for a while, but when it crossed the Gulf Stream, it really picked up strength. And we were talking about 135 miles an hour winds, we believe now, and the Weather Service believes, that actually were at the wall of the eye when it made landfall. And I think we knew it was going to be bad, but you really can't translate that. Your mind will not allow you to translate that until you go look at it. And I think the people who have seen these tapes now have a better idea of what we're facing in this state, the tremendous damage and devastation that this thing did to the coast. And not only to the people on the coast, but as a storm moved, the path moved inland, there are people who have lives to put back together also.
The economic impact, you can't even find the formulas to begin to calculate that yet.
I wouldn't even want to speculate at this point in time, but I know it's more than anything that we've ever experienced in this state because of the amount of development that's been affected.
Loss of tax revenues. This would, I guess, change tax assessment in counties when
I think
their home's not there to be paid taxes.
Well, I think it has such far-reaching ramifications. We haven't had time, and the people who've had to deal with this haven't had time to even sort all these things out. I think we'll still be sorting these things out for some time to come. I really do.
Okay. What can people do next? Obviously, in some of these areas at this point, when you're hearing this broadcast, when we're taping it on a Saturday evening, in Sullivan's Island, Isle of Palms, Wild Dunes, people aren't even allowed back on those islands yet. They're sealed off.
I think what I would do at this point in time is urge people to comply with officials, especially state officials, federal officials, and local officials. And as I heard someone say today, please try to be part of the solution rather than part of the problem. And I know people are concerned about their property, but complying with the wishes and staying away from some of these areas, especially those that don't have utilities at this present time, you're probably going to create more of a problem than you are going to help things by going into some of these areas. I can assure you from what I've seen, the officials in charge are doing everything within their power to bring this situation under control. And I think it's going to take the assistance of everybody, every citizen of this state and every property owner on the coast has been affected to pull us through this situation. But I'm confident that we have a leadership in this state that can do that, and I believe the citizens and the property owners in this state understand that.
Dr. Wayne Beam, Executive Director of the South Carolina Coastal Council, thank you for being with us. It's been a long day today. It's been a long 2 days, but so many people have spent so much time, and it's going to be a hard road for everyone in South Carolina. Thank you for joining us on this special. For all of us at ETV, good night.